Sister made my life hell, then got pregnant by my husband. Now she wants my help after our parents disowned her and left me their $2 million inheritance. My younger sister, Danielle, has always harbored a deep-seated resentment towards me. If you think it stemmed from jealousy, you'd be wrong. She was the favorite child, not me. There was no reason for her to be envious. To give you some context, our mother always indulged Danielle. She was the golden child of our family. Mom cooked her meals, did her laundry, and even asked me to help her with her schoolwork. I was expected to assist her simply because we were family, but I never received the same consideration. I accepted this as I was quite independent. Perhaps it was partly my fault for always meeting her needs without expecting anything in return. She never helped me when I needed it and only approached me when she wanted something. While I was a quiet, introverted kid who enjoyed studying and keeping to myself, she was loud and rough just like our mom. I also tend to be straightforward and honest, never sugarcoating things. I believe my mother may have developed a negative perception of me because of my straightforwardness. This favoritism made Danielle the family's darling, and I didn't mind it while we were growing up. However, problems began when she started bullying and mocking me for being different from her. She would tease me about my height and the fact that I wore glasses. She would sneak into my room, read my diary, and then complain to my mom about what I had written. When I yelled at her and complained to our parents about her invading my privacy, they would laugh it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. She did more awful things, like nearly breaking my glasses and putting nasty things in my food. She even once put little stones in my cereal, but luckily, I found them before they could damage my teeth. When I told my mom, she dismissed it, saying this is how siblings bond. Whenever we fought, Danielle would zero in on my insecurities to insult me. We went to the same school, so she knew I was being bullied by a few kids. Instead of supporting me, she sided with the bullies, calling me names like ugly loser or hairy monkey and encouraging them to physically harm me, saying I was just a big failure. Another time, during a fight over something trivial that I can't even remember, she told me to kill myself. While I could easily brush off most insults, that one really hurt because I was struggling with my mental health at the time. I'm doing better now, but it was devastating to hear that my own sister wanted me dead. Since Mom was often at work and Dad didn't seem to care much, he even scolded me once, claiming it was my fault for irritating her. Things progressively worsened. During high school, there was a shocking incident when Danielle attempted to set my hair on fire, and unbelievably, our father defended her, claiming she was merely playing. Seriously, who behaves like that? Thankfully, my mom eventually sided with me and pointed out the gravity of the situation. She even threatened to call the police on Danielle. This moment was a real eye-opener for my sister as she had never faced any consequences for her actions before. She was genuinely stunned, and my mom made it clear that enough was enough and that Danielle needed to start respecting her older sister. Later, Mom came into my room to talk. I never expected her support because she always told Danielle how similar they were, which was true. Dad admitted that he had waited for years, hoping Danielle would mature, but he was slowly realizing that Danielle was becoming a big bully. Hearing this from my dad was incredibly validating, and I almost broke down in tears. I confessed everything Danielle had done to me over the years and even mentioned the bullying at school. My dad was shocked at how much I had endured. The next day, he spoke to the principal to ensure the bullies were warned about severe consequences if they continued. Later that evening, Dad enrolled me in MMA at our local gym, telling me I needed to toughen up and stand up to bullies in my life. I admit that a nerdy kid like me trying to learn to fight might have seemed laughable, but I was very focused. I managed my time well to balance my studies and daily workouts, and the MMA classes completely changed my life and physique. One day, Danielle was up to her antics again. She stole my pocket money, which we received for helping with chores. I had been saving it for a while. Danielle sneaked into my room and took it. I caught her just as she was about to cycle off with her friends. I demanded she return my money, but Danielle mocked me, saying all I could do was run to Daddy for help. I don't know what came over me, but I punched her in the face. She was stunned, fell backward, and I retrieved my money from her pocket before throwing her back down. Danielle started crying loudly, which was quite comical. However, my mother rushed out to help her and find out what happened. When she learned I had fought her, she was surprised and reprimanded me, saying I should be a better role model for Danielle, who seemed to enjoy seeing me scolded. My mother also complained to my dad about my behavior, saying I needed to be controlled. My dad grimly asked both of us to explain ourselves. I told him how Danielle had stolen the money I had worked hard for and saved. While Danielle tried to justify it by saying she needed the money for a date, and that as her sister, I should help her. However, Dad told Danielle she was lucky I only punched her for stealing because anyone else would have called the police. He continued to tell Danielle that she had no right to take others' things without their consent. Danielle didn't like that and threw a tantrum, likely hoping our mother would side with her, but Dad remained firm. When Danielle realized she wasn't going to be punished for being hit, she screamed how much she hated me and ran back to her room, locking herself in. Following that incident, Danielle began to distance herself from me. She had finally understood that she couldn't bully me anymore, and that even Dad had stopped supporting her antics. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were equals. Though she could no longer physically harm me, she resorted to verbal insults when our parents weren't around. Her behavior worsened with age, becoming angrier and more short-tempered each year. When I approached her with a question, she would ignore me and walk away, muttering insults like nerd or loser under her breath. If she needed to communicate something, she would relay it through our mother instead of speaking to me directly. When I questioned my mother about why Danielle couldn't just talk to me, she would urge me to be more understanding. I couldn't tell if it was just puberty or genuine hatred. Over time, dealing with her comments became unbearable, and I longed to move out and get away from her. I repeatedly asked my mother to mediate a sit-down conversation for us to resolve our issues, but she always refused, saying she didn't want to get involved. When I asked her opinion on why Danielle treated me this way, she would brush off the question. Eventually, I left for my dream university, having earned a scholarship as a top student. My dad threw a party for me, and even my mom seemed proud. However, Danielle remained aloof and distant, barely acknowledging my achievements. The day I left for university was a mix of excitement for the future and relief to escape the toxic home environment. The first few months at university were liberating. I made new friends, enjoyed my classes, and started to build a life separate from the oppressive atmosphere of my childhood. The constant fear of Danielle's verbal attacks lifted, giving me a newfound sense of peace. During my second year, I met my husband, Kyle, at a frat party through a friend, and we immediately clicked. Coming from a religious background, having kids outside of marriage was frowned upon. However, when we discovered I was pregnant in our final year, we decided to marry right after graduation. Our wedding was a small but joyful ceremony. Our parents were happy for us, and we enjoyed the celebration. At that moment, I believed Kyle was the love of my life. I had always envisioned a monogamous relationship, one man to come home to and share my life with. Despite other men showing interest over the years, I never pursued anything because I was genuinely content in my marriage. Kyle was my dream guy, and I never wanted to hurt him. However, I later uncovered 2 incidents of infidelity in our marriage. One was an intermittent affair with his married co-worker that spanned several years, and the other was a brief fling with an ex-girlfriend during a visit to his family. Some might think I was naive. And looking back, I can't completely disagree. Each time we separated for a while, I chose to forgive my husband. I didn't want to raise our child in a broken home and believed we could overcome these obstacles. The affair with his co-worker happened when we were young, and I attributed it to youthful mistakes and poor judgment. For a period, things seemed to get better. Although I could never fully trust him again, I did my best to set aside my doubts, knowing that if I chose to forgive, I had to genuinely work toward a fresh start. It's been 4 years since his second betrayal, and I felt confident in my decision to give him another chance. Kyle seemed to have changed, and we were genuinely happy, planning our family's future. However, 3 months ago, my world was shattered once more when he revealed that he had been having a long-term affair and suggested that our daughter might not be mine. His words struck me like a ton of bricks. A mix of shock, betrayal, and disbelief overwhelmed me. I struggled to comprehend the enormity of his confession. In a daze, I managed to ask why he had kept such a significant secret and how he could have done something so devastating. His reaction was cold and indifferent, as if he were detached from the pain he caused. His vague responses left me with more questions than answers. It was a surreal and painful moment, confronting the shattered trust and uncertainty about my own family. I continued to press Kyle for the truth because I felt I deserved to know the father of the child I had been raising since birth. Ultimately, he admitted it was Danielle. My eyes widened in shock as I asked Kyle what he meant. He explained that he and Danielle had become friends when I introduced him to my family, and he stayed with us from Thanksgiving until New Year's. Danielle, usually cold to me, was warm and polite towards him, which made me glad because I didn't want Kyle to feel unwelcome. Kyle wanted to be accepted into my family, so he spent significant time with my dad whenever possible. He noticed the rift between Danielle and me and questioned me about it. I opened up about our strained relationship and explained that we might never repair it due to her unresolved feelings. Kyle understood, but started including Danielle in our outings, hoping it would help us bond. Whenever we planned to watch a movie, he invited Danielle, and we watched whatever she chose. During this time, Danielle and I exchanged a few words, which was an improvement compared to her usual silent treatment. I remember Kyle and Danielle hanging out and playing video games together, but I never thought much of it. Kyle told me that one day, Danielle opened up to him about her struggles in a recent breakup. Feeling vulnerable, she struck up a friendship with him. He mentioned that she would harmlessly flirt with him when I wasn't around, and eventually, things escalated beyond his control. The vision of my husband and sister sleeping together made me feel sick. Kyle confessed that he felt guilty afterward and left her, which matched his abrupt decision to go home instead of spending New Year's with me. Although I tried to convince him to stay, he was adamant about leaving. When we met back at college after the holidays, he was his usual cheerful self, so I didn't question anything. 2 weeks later, we found out I was pregnant. Kyle admitted he didn't know if the child was mine or Danielle's. And with no way to prove it, he chose to stay with me knowing I was the more dependable sister. This was why we got married. My world felt like it was crashing down. The daughter I loved might not even be mine. I asked Kyle if he had been sleeping with Danielle recently, and he slowly nodded. He revealed that they had always stayed in touch because their chemistry was undeniable. They would sneak off to hotels, lying to me about working overtime. He admitted that half of his business trips were actually romantic getaways with her. I asked why he married me if he wanted my sister, and Kyle said he didn't want to be the one to break off the marriage. He saw me as a wonderful mother to our daughter and decided to stay. In his words, he made a mistake and didn't know when to stop. I told Kyle I was glad he told me the truth, but that I was going to pack up and leave. He started crying, asking for forgiveness, and expected me to yell at him. Instead, I calmly packed my clothes. Kyle insisted that if I loved him, I should fight for him and that mistakes happen in every marriage. When he realized I wasn't going to do anything, he changed tactics, saying our daughter would be affected by a divorce and that children shouldn't be raised in broken homes. I reminded him that I might not even be the mother, which made him cry more and accuse me of being cruel. It seemed like he believed nothing could make me want to leave the marriage. Perhaps it was partly my fault for letting things slide in the past. While I did love him, it felt more like it stemmed from thinking we had a daughter together and had been together since college. Kyle kept insisting it wasn't too late to fix things, but I struggled to believe him and had no patience left. Trust was a major issue, and his words felt hollow. Even if I forgave him, I could never forget he slept with my sister. I've always believed in forgiving mistakes because we're all flawed, but this was beyond acceptable limits. I left him crying on the doorstep and checked into a hotel. The next day, I went straight to my parents and revealed everything about my husband's affair with Danielle, explaining how they had been secretly sleeping together for years. The shock on their faces was undeniable. True to his nature, my father initially tried to defend Danielle, insisting that his girl could never do such a thing to her own sister. Determined to expose the truth, I asked my parents to remain silent and let me call Danielle in front of them. I instructed them to stay quiet so I could catch Danielle off guard, making her believe it was a private conversation. When Danielle answered the phone, I confronted her about the affair. At first, she vehemently denied it, refusing to accept any responsibility. However, when I told her that Kyle had admitted to everything, she started blaming him, calling him characterless. She claimed it wasn't her fault if men were attracted to her and that she was the better-looking sister. I told her firmly that I would expose her to everyone. When Danielle mocked me, saying no one would believe me because she was the golden child, I scoffed at her arrogance and thanked her for confirming the truth, knowing our parents had heard everything. Danielle went quiet and then spluttered, trying to explain herself and salvage her image. My father, still in shock, demanded an explanation from Danielle. She stuttered through a feeble attempt to justify her actions, blaming everyone else but herself and desperately trying to shift the blame onto Kyle. I could see my father, who had once been protective of his favorite daughter, now felt a mix of disappointment and anger. In that charged moment, I felt a strange sense of vindication. For years, I had endured Danielle's torment. Now the truth was out, and the roles were reversed. It was Danielle who stood exposed. Her actions laid bare for everyone to see. As Danielle's words faltered, my mother, usually reserved in her expressions, couldn't contain her disappointment. She asked me to pass her the phone and began to speak to Danielle. "Danielle," my mother began, her voice laden with disappointment, "what you've done isn't just a betrayal of your sister, but a betrayal of this family. You slept with your sister's husband and continued the affair even after they were married. Your actions have severe consequences and have irreversibly shattered the trust we had in you. I raised both of you to value family, loyalty, and decency. What you've shown today defies everything I've tried to teach you." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink into Danielle's conscience. "Your disregard for your sister's feelings and the lack of respect for her marriage are unacceptable. You've not only hurt her, but also torn apart the bonds that hold our family together. Your father and I are partly to blame for what you've become, but we will no longer tolerate this behavior. From today, you're cut off from the college funds we set up for you. You'll have to figure out how to pay your university fees on your own. We will also stop funding your lifestyle. Do you think it makes you more of a woman to sleep with married men? Let's see how you manage without my money." Throughout this, I maintained a composed demeanor. Although I initially wanted to scream at Danielle, watching my mom punish her was the ultimate vindication. I had exposed her true nature, and it was clear she had underestimated the consequences. My father, despite Danielle's persistent protests, continued to justify her, but my mother swiftly ended the call, shutting down Danielle's attempts to explain away her actions. Afterward, my dad approached me and hugged me. It had been a long time since we shared such a moment, but in that embrace, there was an unspoken understanding and support amid the family turmoil. He apologized for not believing me all this time. My 14-year-old self could never have imagined this moment, being vindicated and embraced by my father. Following this, my mom helped me find a good lawyer to divorce Kyle. He and his lawyer tried to fight dirty, asking for alimony since I earned more than him, but his affair played heavily in my favor. We also conducted a paternity test, and it was confirmed that Danielle was indeed the mother of the child. The news was incredibly painful, even worse than discovering Kyle's infidelity. I was furious that the daughter I had loved and raised wasn't mine. However, I decided to stay strong. Kyle begged me to continue visiting my daughter, arguing she shouldn't be punished for the situation, but I couldn't bear to see her. She reminded me too much of Danielle, and I hated it. After my divorce was finalized, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me as I moved into my own bachelor pad. It felt surreal to live alone since I had married so young and never really had the chance to experience independence. However, my naturally independent nature allowed me to quickly adapt to my new lifestyle, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 weeks ago, my mom called to tell me she was considering changing her will because she didn't want to leave anything to Danielle. My mom is incredibly stubborn, and once she decided to cut Danielle out of her life, she stuck to it. Danielle tried reaching out to our parents and even showed up at their doorstep, begging for forgiveness, but they refused to let her in. Even my father, who usually gave in to Danielle's tantrums, seemed done with her, though it must have been hardest for him. Danielle never texted me to apologize for what she had done, showing she didn't regret her actions. She was just upset about being cut off from our parents. Mom told me she planned to leave everything to me, ensuring Danielle wouldn't contest it later. She would leave Danielle only $1. My eyes widened in shock as my mom had worked hard her entire life, including her assets, retirement fund, and life insurance. The total came to nearly $2 million. The only condition in her will was that if my mom passed away before my dad, he would continue living in their house even though ownership would transfer to me. I didn't mind this as I wanted to care for my dad in his final days. Somehow, Danielle found out about this and, unable to reach our parents, called me yesterday trying to make amends. She explained how she was struggling with college and that after Kyle discovered the paternity of the child, he had been pestering her for child support. She said she had no money and was looking for part-time jobs but couldn't find anything. She begged me to talk to our family to start fresh since she really needed my help. I laughed in her face and told her I was done with her. I reminded her that she should have thought about the consequences before sleeping with my husband and getting him pregnant. Danielle argued that I was being unfair and that Kyle was also to blame, to which I agreed. I reminded her that I had divorced him, making him her responsibility now. She shouldn't be calling me to complain about him or the child since these were the consequences of her own actions. Danielle started to raise her voice, but I interrupted, reminding her that she was no longer the favored child in the family, but the black sheep who had slept with her own sister's husband. At that moment, Danielle began to cry, telling me how everyone, including our grandparents and relatives, had turned against her. While this was true, it was no longer my concern. I told her we were done and that she should never call me again since I no longer considered her my sister. Since then, I've replayed the conversation in my mind. Despite my hatred for my sister, I had never heard her cry, at least not since we were kids. I won't lie. It did hurt me a bit to see her so helpless. So, I guess I'm here to ask if I should talk to our parents about her or if I would be an asshole if I don't. Update 1. Hi, everyone. Many of you have been asking why I am no longer in contact with my daughter, Harper, and some have even called me cruel. I need to explain that I am not comfortable raising another woman's child. This isn't a stepson situation. I was led to believe Harper was my daughter, only to later discover she is actually my sister Danielle's daughter. Naturally, this revelation hurt deeply, and I cried over it for days. The main reason I don't want any contact with Harper is that I no longer want Kyle in my life. If I remain connected to his child, he will find a way to re-enter my life, and I need my space. You may think I'm cruel or selfish, but I can't see her ever again, at least not for a very long time. Update 2. Most of you correctly guessed that it was my father who informed Danielle about my mom changing her will, leading Danielle to call me as a last resort to fix things. I confronted him in front of my mom, and he broke down saying I had punished Danielle enough, and that she had learned her lesson. My mom firmly told my father that if he believed what Danielle did was forgivable, then she could no longer stay married to him because she could never forgive such a betrayal. This threat silenced my father. My mom made it clear that if he ever talked with Danielle again and we found out, he could pack his bags and leave. As I mentioned, my mom is very stubborn. Hopefully, my father will learn from his mistakes. Update 3. Reddit. It's been 5 months since my last update. My relationship with my parents has improved over the past few months. My mom and I go golfing every weekend and she treats me more like a buddy than a daughter. Although my father misses Danielle, he has stayed away from her. The last I heard about Danielle was from my cousin who said Danielle had been asking everyone for money and eventually had to drop out of college because she couldn't afford the fees. She and Kyle are living together, and she has a part-time job as a mechanic. Apparently, they are raising Harper together, which is a good thing, I guess. I never discuss Danielle with my parents, and they don't bring her up either. For everyone asking, I am doing quite well. I was promoted at my job 2 months ago, so my salary has significantly improved. I haven't been dating anyone as I feel I still need time and space to heal. I've been going to therapy, so we'll see how that works out. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.